in the depths of the unknown, where shadows whisper and fear takes form. Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub, the place where classic horror and mystery come alive. Tonight, I bring you a reimagined version of Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier, retold with a suspenseful narrative style that grips the soul and breathes new life into this haunting tale. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the shadows.
"Don't turn your head," John murmured, leaning closer to his wife. "2 tables behind me, those women haven't stopped staring since we sat down." Laura, quick as ever, stretched into an exaggerated yawn, tilting her face skyward as though tracking a plane that wasn't there. "Exactly," John added under his breath. "Behind me. If you spin around now, they'll know we've noticed." Laura resorted to the oldest trick in the book. She let her napkin slip to the floor. As she bent to retrieve it, her eyes darted sideways, catching a glimpse before she straightened again. Her cheeks hollowed, the first sign of laughter she was struggling to contain. "They're not women at all. They're men. Twins! Dressed up!" Her voice cracked with suppressed hysteria. John quickly topped up her glass, masking his own unease with a crooked smile. "Play along. Pretend to cough. They won't suspect a thing. Can't you see it? Criminals on a European tour. Sisters in Torcello today, brothers in Venice tomorrow. Just a change of wigs and costumes and no one's the wiser." "Thieves or killers?" Laura asked, eyes glittering. "Killers without a doubt," John replied. "But why, I wonder, have they chosen me?" The waiter's arrival with coffee broke the tension, giving Laura a moment to compose herself. She dabbed her face with powder, using the Compax mirror to steal another glance. "You know," she said softly, "we've got them wrong. They're not criminals at all. They're just 2 faded schoolmistresses who saved every penny for this trip. They've come from some forgotten town in Australia with names as quaint as Tilly and Tiny." Her voice carried a lightness he hadn't heard in months, a bubbling note that reminded him of the woman she used to be. The crease of worry between her brows had smoothed away, and for the first time since their loss, John felt a flicker of hope. If I can keep her laughing, if we can slip back into our old rhythm, the silly games, the whispered jokes about strangers at nearby tables, then maybe, just maybe, life will stitch itself together again. Laura leaned back with a smile. "That was a wonderful lunch. I really did enjoy it." John's heart surged with relief. Thank God. He bent forward, lowering his voice to a conspirator's whisper. "One of them's leaving the table, off to the restroom. Do you think she's going to change her wig?" Laura's eyes gleamed with mischief. "Don't say a word. I'll follow her. She might have a suitcase hidden away, ready for a quick costume change." She began to hum softly, a private signal of contentment he knew well. For a moment, the shadow of grief lifted, replaced with the familiar thrill of their holiday game, imagining secret lives for strangers. "Is she passing us now?" Laura asked. "Right beside us," John murmured. Alone, the woman was less remarkable than she had seemed in the pair. Tall, angular, with sharp features and hair cropped close in a style that belonged to another era. Her clothes were severe, a man's shirt and tie beneath a sports jacket, a gray tweed skirt brushing her calves, stockings and sensible black shoes. John had seen her type before, at golf courses, at dog shows, at parties where they lit cigarettes faster than any man. But what unsettled him was not her appearance. It was the fact that there were 2 of them. Identical. The only difference, one carried a shock of white hair. Laura's voice dropped to a murmur. "Suppose I find myself beside her in the restroom, and she suddenly begins to undress." John gave a crooked smile. "Depends on what she reveals. If she pulls out a syringe, don't wait around. Run."
Laura pressed her lips tight, cheeks hollowing as laughter threatened to break free.
Then, with a sudden resolve, she straightened her shoulders and rose. "I mustn't laugh," she whispered, "and whatever happens, don't look at me when I return, especially if we come out together." She lifted her bag with exaggerated poise and drifted away, following her quarry with the air of an amateur spy. John drained the last of the wine into his glass and struck a match for his cigarette. The garden was bathed in merciless sunlight. The noisy Americans were gone, the monocled stranger had vanished, and the family at the far end had departed. For a fleeting moment, peace returned. One of the twins reclined in her chair, eyes closed as though asleep. "Thank God," he thought. "At least Laura has her silly game again. Maybe this holiday will work after all. Maybe it will dull the ache, if only for a while." The doctor's words echoed in his mind. "She'll recover. They all do. You still have your son." But John had known better. Christine had been different, his wife's entire world. A boy of school age was already his own person, independent, resilient. But a 5-year-old girl, fragile and adored, could never be replaced. Another child would not heal the wound, it would only sharpen the absence. He lifted his glass and froze. The woman was staring at him again. Not a casual glance, not idle curiosity, but something sharper. Her pale blue eyes fixed on him with unnerving intensity. Damn her. Stare if you must. He exhaled a plume of smoke and forced a mocking smile. But she didn't flinch. Her gaze held him, cold and unblinking, until he was the one who looked away. He stubbed out his cigarette, called for the bill, and muttered a few empty compliments about the meal. The motion steadied him, but the prickling at the back of his neck lingered. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the sensation was gone. A furtive glance back showed her eyes closed once more, her head tilted in repose. Sleeping, or pretending. The waiter slipped away. The garden fell silent. And John was left with the uneasy certainty that peace was only an illusion. John checked his watch. 10 minutes. 15 nearly. What on earth is she doing? He began to toy with the idea of teasing her later, imagining some absurd scenario where the old woman had stripped down to her underclothes, Laura caught in the middle, the restaurant manager bursting in with outrage, scandal, and whispered threats of blackmail. He almost smiled at the thought. Then came the crunch of footsteps on gravel. One of the twins passed by, alone. She paused at her sister's chair, her tall, bony frame blocking John's view. He caught only fragments of her voice, an accent, perhaps Scottish, before she bent to help the other rise. The second twin leaned heavily on her arm, stooped and frail, and together they drifted across the garden, vanishing through a gap in the hedge. Impatience stirred. John pushed back his chair, ready to head inside, when Laura appeared. Relief turned instantly to alarm. "Well, you certainly took your time," he began, but the words died. Her face stopped him cold. She stumbled toward the table, pale and shaken, as though she had walked out of a dream. He pulled up a chair beside her, grasping her hand. "Darling, what is it? Are you unwell?" She shook her head slowly, and when she turned to him, her eyes no longer looked dazed, but strangely radiant, almost exalted. "It's wonderful," she whispered. "The most wonderful thing. She isn't gone, John. Christine is still with us. That's why they stared. The sisters could see her." John's stomach clenched. God, no. This is what I feared. She's slipping away, losing herself to fantasy. How do I stop this? How do I hold her together? He forced a smile, his voice gentle, coaxing. "Laura, my love, come on, let's go. The bill's paid. We'll walk to the cathedral, Take in the square, and soon enough the launch will carry us back to Venice." But she wasn't listening. His words slid past her unheard, as though she were already elsewhere, following a vision he could neither see nor fight.
"John, love, I have to tell you what happened." Her voice trembled with urgency. She leaned closer, eyes wide, as though afraid the words might vanish if she didn't speak them quickly. "I followed her, just as we planned. She was at the mirror, combing her hair. I went into the stall, then came out to wash my hands. She was beside me, rinsing hers, and then, suddenly, she turned. Her voice was strong, Scottish. She said, 'Don't be unhappy anymore. My sister has seen your little girl. She was sitting between you and your husband, laughing.'" Laura's breath caught. "Darling, I nearly fainted. I had to sit down. She bent over me, touched my head, and told me not to be afraid, that joy can cut like a sword. But all was well. Christine wanted me to know. John, I swear I'm not imagining this. It's true." The desperation in her tone made his stomach twist. He forced a smile, his words soft, soothing. "Of course I believe you, Laura. It's just a shock. I'm upset because you're upset." But she shook her head, her face glowing with a strange, almost exalted calm. "I'm not upset. I'm happy. Happier than I've been in weeks. You know how I've suffered, how I tried to hide it, but now it's lifted. I know she was right. Christine is still with us." She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, smiling through tears. "The woman told me she was a retired doctor from Edinburgh. Her sister, the blind one, has studied the occult all her life. Since losing her sight, she sees more clearly than ever, like a medium. She described Christine perfectly, John. The little blue and white dress with puffed sleeves, the one she wore at her birthday. She said she was smiling, happy. Oh, it's made me so happy I could cry." There was no hysteria, no wildness, only quiet conviction. She lit the cigarette he offered, her hand steady, her voice calm. John tried to match her composure, but unease gnawed at him. If this belief gave her peace, he couldn't take it away. And yet, the thought of strangers peering into their grief, of uncanny visions and telepathy, it unsettled him deeply. So the one who had stared at him so intently was blind. That explained the fixed gaze, but it didn't make it less disturbing. Oh, hell, he thought bitterly. Why did we come here? A coin toss between Torcello and Padua, and we had to choose Torcello. "You didn't arrange to meet them again, did you?" John asked, trying to sound offhand. "Of course not," Laura replied lightly. "Why would I? The vision was given, and that was enough. Besides, they're moving on, circling the globe before returning to Scotland. Funny, isn't it? Like our old game. I guessed Australia, but it turns out I was only half wrong. Sweet old things. Nothing at all like jewel thieves or assassins." Her composure had returned completely. She rose, brushing off the moment. "Come on. We've come all this way to Torcello. We must see the cathedral." They crossed the sunlit piazza, weaving past stalls of scarves, trinkets, and postcards, then joined the stream of tourists heading toward Santa Maria Assunta. Laura, guidebook in hand, slipped into her old habit of moving slowly, studying every mosaic and column with reverence. John trailed behind, his mind elsewhere, scanning the crowd for the sisters. No sign of them. Perhaps they had slipped into the smaller church nearby. The cathedral's beauty left him cold. The solemn mosaics, the golden saints, the Virgin and Child, all seemed distant, unreachable. Laura touched his sleeve, pointing upward with quiet awe, but he barely registered the image. His gaze drifted instead to the doorway, where frescoes of the blessed and the damned loomed in judgment. And there they were. The twins stood framed in the entrance, the blind one clinging to her sister's arm,
Her sightless eyes locked on him with terrifying precision. John froze. The air thickened. A crushing weight of inevitability pressed down on him. This is the end, he thought. There's no escape, no future. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the sisters turned and slipped away into the light outside. The suffocating dread lifted, leaving only anger in its place. How dare they, he raged inwardly. Two meddling old charlatans, preying on grief, unsettling strangers for sport. Fraudulent, unhealthy. Give them half a chance, and they'd have bled Laura for money.
Laura tugged gently at his sleeve. Isn't she beautiful? So calm, so radiant. Who? John asked, distracted. The Madonna, she whispered. There's something about her. It pierces right through you. Don't you feel it? He shrugged. I suppose. Too many people crowding around, though. She looked at him, astonished. What's that got to do with anything? You're impossible sometimes. Never mind. Let's get away from the crowd. I want to buy some postcards. Her disappointment was plain, and she slipped through the throng toward the door. Outside, John's voice was abrupt. Plenty of time for postcards. Let's explore a little. He veered off the main path, away from the stalls and the drifting tourists, toward a narrow track that led through rough ground to a shallow canal. The pale water shimmered under the fierce sun, a soothing counterpoint to the heat pressing down on them. I don't think this goes anywhere, Laura said doubtfully. It's muddy, and the guidebook says there's more we should see. Forget the book, John muttered, pulling her down beside him on the bank. He slipped an arm around her shoulders. It's the wrong time of day for sightseeing anyway. Look, there's a rat swimming across. He tossed a stone. The creature vanished beneath the surface, leaving only a trail of bubbles. Don't, Laura protested softly. Poor thing. Then, after a pause, her hand resting on his knee, Do you think Christine is here with us? He hesitated. What answer could he give? Would it always be like this? Her searching, him pretending? If you feel she is, he said slowly, then yes, she is. But in his mind, the memory was sharper. Christine alive, darting along the bank, shoes flung aside, eager to paddle in the shallows, Laura's anxious voice calling after her, Sweetheart, be careful, come back. The woman said she was smiling, sitting right beside us, Laura murmured. She rose abruptly, brushing the dust from her dress, her mood shifting to restlessness. Come on, let's go back. John followed, his heart sinking. He knew she didn't care about postcards or mosaics. She wanted the sisters again, not to speak, perhaps, but simply to be near them. Back in the square, the crowd had thinned. Only a few stragglers lingered by the stalls. The sisters were gone. They must have joined the ferry back to Venice. Relief washed over him like cool water. Look, postcards. Dozens of them at that stall, John said quickly, forcing cheer into his voice. And those scarves. Let me buy you one. Laura laughed. Darling, I've already too many. Don't waste your money. It isn't a waste. I'm in the mood to buy. What about a basket? Lace, perhaps. We never have enough of either. Still laughing, she let him tug her toward the stall. He busied himself rummaging through the trinkets, his clumsy Italian amusing the vendor. All the while, he knew exactly what he was doing, stalling for time, letting the tide of tourists drift toward the ferry, ensuring the sisters would be gone, out of sight, out of their lives. 20 minutes later, Laura held up their prize. Never has so much junk been crammed into one basket, she said, her bubbling laughter easing his heart. The shadow had passed. Their launch was waiting at the landing stage, the same boat that had brought them from Venice. Familiar faces were already aboard, the Americans, the monocled man. Earlier, John had thought the price steep for lunch and transport. Now he would have paid double, just for the relief of leaving Torcello behind. They settled into the open air as the boat chugged down the canal and out into the lagoon. The ordinary ferry steamed ahead toward Murano, while their smaller craft cut directly across the water toward Venice. John slipped an arm around Laura. This time she leaned into him, smiling, her head resting on his shoulder. "It's been a lovely day," she said softly. "I'll never forget it. At last I can enjoy our holiday." He wanted to shout with relief. "It's going to be all right," he told himself. "Let her believe what she wants. Doesn't matter. If it makes her happy, then so be it." Venice rose before them, sharp against the glowing sky, its beauty promising new beginnings. He spoke eagerly of the evening ahead, where they might dine, not their usual place near the Fenice, but somewhere different, somewhere new. "Yes, but it must be cheap," Laura teased, "after all we've spent today." Their hotel on the Grand Canal welcomed them back with familiar warmth. The clerk smiled as he handed over the key. The bedroom felt like home. Laura's belongings neatly arranged on the dressing table, yet touched with that festive strangeness only a holiday room carries. Alive while they inhabited it, destined to fade into anonymity once they left. He turned on the taps, steam rising as the bath filled. Now, he thought, now at last is the moment to reclaim her, to reclaim us. When he returned to the room, she understood. She opened her arms, smiling. And for the first time in weeks, relief washed over him like a blessing. Later, as Laura fastened her earrings before the mirror, she sighed. "I'm not terribly hungry. Why don't we just stay in and eat here?" "Absolutely not," John exclaimed. "I'm starving and in the mood to celebrate. I want wine, plenty of it. Not bright lights and music, surely. No, something smaller, dark, intimate, a little sinister. A place where secrets are whispered between lovers who don't belong to each other." Laura sniffed. "Which means you'll spend the evening smirking at some Italian girl while I'm left staring at the back of a stranger's head." They laughed together, stepping out into the velvet night. Venice shimmered around them, the gondolas rocking gently at the molo, lanterns flickering across the water, voices rising and falling in the warm air. Couples strolled aimlessly, sailors shouted in groups, and dark-eyed girls clicked past on high heels, whispering to one another. The trouble with Venice is that once you start walking, you can't stop. One bridge leads to another and then another. But I'm certain there are no restaurants this way. We're nearly at the public gardens. Let's turn back. I know a place near San Zaccaria." "Nonsense," John replied. "If we cut down by the arsenal, cross the bridge, and had left, we'll reach San Zaccaria from the other side. We did it the other morning." "Yes, but that was daylight. It's different now. These streets aren't well lit." "Don't fuss. I have an instinct for these things." They turned down the Fondamenta del Arsenale, crossed a small bridge, and passed the church of San Martino. Ahead, two canals split the way, one to the right, one to the left. John hesitated. "You see," Laura said sharply, "we're lost, just as I warned." "Not at all," John insisted. "It's the left-hand one. I remember the bridge." The canal was narrow, the houses pressing close on either side. By day it had seemed warm and sheltered, sunlight glinting on the water, windows open, laundry fluttering, a canary singing. But now, in the near darkness, the shutters were closed, the water stagnant, the air heavy. The moored boats along the slimy steps looked less like vessels and more like coffins. Laura stopped, gripping the rail. "I don't remember this bridge, and I don't like the look of that alley."
John pointed ahead. "There's a lamp halfway up. I know exactly where we are, not far from the Greek Quarter."
They had just crossed the bridge, about to step into the narrow alley, when it came, the cry. It rose from across the canal, muffled, strangled, impossible to place. Every shuttered house looked lifeless, sealed tombs of wood and stone. Laura clutched his arm. "What was that?" she whispered. "Some drunk," John muttered, too quickly. "Come on." But it hadn't sounded like a drunk, more like someone choking, a cry cut short by unseen hands. "We should call the police," Laura urged. "For heaven's sake," John snapped. "This isn't Piccadilly." "Well, I'm not staying here," she said, her voice sharp with unease. She hurried up the twisting alley, her footsteps echoing. John lingered. Something had caught his eye. From a cellar door across the canal, a small figure emerged. A child. A girl, no more than 5 or 6, a pixie hood framing her head, a tiny coat flapping as she moved. Without hesitation, she leapt into a moored boat, then another, skipping across the line of vessels with startling agility. John's breath caught when she slipped, arms flailing above the black water. But she recovered, sprang to the last boat, and tugged at its rope. The vessel swung across the canal, bumping against the far steps. The girl jumped again, vanished into another cellar doorway, and the boat drifted back into the current. The whole thing had lasted no more than 4 minutes. Then, footsteps. Laura, returning. She had seen nothing. Relief flooded him. The sight of a child so close to danger would have shattered her fragile calm. "What are you doing?" she called. "I can't go on alone. The alley splits into 2. "Sorry," he said quickly, hurrying to her side. He took her arm, walking with a confidence he didn't feel. "There weren't any more cries, were there?" "No," I lied. "Nothing. Just a drunk, I told you." The alley spilled them into a deserted square behind a church he didn't recognize. He pressed on, leading her across, over another bridge, into yet another street. "Wait," he said at last, pausing. "I think it's this way. If we take the right-hand turning, it should lead us into the Greek Quarter. San Giorgio must be close." But even as he spoke, the memory of the child lingered, darting across the boats, swallowed by the shadows of a house that seemed to breathe menace. She said nothing. Doubt was creeping in. This city was a labyrinth, and it felt as though they might wander in circles forever, back to the bridge where that terrible cry had echoed. John pressed forward stubbornly, and then, to his relief, the streets opened into light. People strolled ahead, a church spire rose above the rooftops, and the familiar glow of San Zaccaria came into view. "There, you see?" he said. "We found it. Your restaurant must be close." Even if it wasn't, there were others. The glitter of lights, the hum of voices, the shimmer of canals, it was all reassuring. A neon sign, Ristorante, glowed blue down a side alley like a beacon. "Is this the place?" he asked. "Who cares?" Laura replied. "Let's eat here." They stepped inside, swallowed by a rush of heat, the clatter of cutlery, the smell of wine and pasta, the laughter of strangers. "For 2? This way, please." A cramped table, a menu scrawled in Move Biro, a waiter hovering impatiently. "2 large Camparis with soda," John ordered firmly. "Then we'll look at the menu." He passed the card to Laura, scanning the room with idle curiosity. "Mostly Italians. Good sign." Then his gaze froze. Across the restaurant, at a table just being settled, were the sisters. They must have entered moments after him and Laura, for they were only now removing their coats, the waiter bustling at their side. A chill ran through him.
This was no coincidence. They had followed. They must have seen him and Laura in the street and slipped in behind them. Why here, of all places in Venice? Unless Laura had arranged it. Or perhaps the sisters had suggested it at Torcello, a little restaurant near San Zaccaria. We go there sometimes. And hadn't it been Laura who had mentioned San Zaccaria before their walk? Laura was still bent over the menu, oblivious. Any moment she would look up and then... "You know," John said quickly, desperate to distract her, "tomorrow we should drive to Padua, lunch there, see the cathedral, touch St. Anthony's tomb, admire the Giotto frescoes, then back by the Brenta villas. What do you think?" But it was too late. Laura lifted her head, her eyes widening. A small gasp escaped her lips, genuine, unmistakable. "Look," she whispered. "How extraordinary! How utterly amazing!" John's voice snapped, sharp with dread. "What?"
"There they are," Laura whispered, her face alight. "My wonderful twins! They've seen us. They're looking this way." She lifted her hand in greeting, radiant with delight. Across the room, the sister from Torcello inclined her head with a smile. John's stomach twisted. "False old witch! They followed us here. I know they did." "I must go to them," Laura said suddenly, "just to tell them how happy I've been today, thanks to them." "For heaven's sake," John snapped. "The drinks are here. We haven't even ordered. Can't it wait until later?" "I won't be a moment," she insisted. "And I only want scampi, nothing else. I told you I wasn't hungry." Before he could stop her, she was on her feet, brushing past the waiter with the tray, crossing the room as though greeting lifelong friends. She bent over their table, shook their hands warmly, and, finding a vacant chair, sat down, smiling, talking. The sister she knew responded at once, nodding, speaking animatedly. The blind one remained still, her pale eyes fixed, unblinking. John's jaw clenched. "Fine, then I'll drink." He drained his Campari in one swallow, ordered another, jabbed at the menu without caring what he chose, though he remembered to order scampi for Laura. And a bottle of Suave, with ice. The evening was ruined. What should have been an intimate celebration had been hijacked by spiritualist nonsense. Christine's ghost dragged to the table like an unwelcome guest. In life, she'd have been tucked up in bed by now, he thought bitterly. The Campari's bitterness matched his mood. He watched them across the room, Laura leaning forward, listening intently, the talkative sister gesturing, the blind one silent, her sightless eyes locked on him like a curse. "She's a fraud," he thought savagely, "not blind at all. Both of them are frauds. They could just as easily be men in disguise, preying on Laura." His second drink blurred his vision, but not his anger. Laura remained at their table, asking questions, smiling faintly, while the sisters held her in their orbit. The waiters arrived with food, Laura's scampi, and his own dish, a grotesque heap drowned in lurid sauce. "The signora does not come?" one of them asked politely. John jabbed a finger across the room, his words slurred but deliberate. "Tell the signora, her scampi will get cold." John stared at the dish before him, poking at it with distaste. The pale sauce slid away to reveal 2 thick rounds of pork, glistening with garlic. He forced a bite, chewed, and nearly gagged. The sweetness of the sauce clung unpleasantly to the meat. Pushing the plate aside, he realized Laura had returned, slipping quietly into her chair. She said nothing, and he was grateful. He was too close to nausea to answer. She began on her scampi, calm, detached, as though nothing were wrong. The waiter, sensing his mistake, whisked away John's plate without comment. "A green salad," John muttered, his voice low. Laura didn't even glance at him, didn't tease him for drinking too much, as she might have done once. When she had finished her meal and was sipping her wine, John nibbling at his salad like a man half sick,
She finally spoke. "Darling, I know you won't believe this, but after Torcello, the sisters went to the cathedral. The blind one had another vision. She said Christine was trying to warn us that we'd be in danger if we stayed in Venice. Christine wants us to leave as soon as possible." John's stomach tightened. "So that's it. They want to run our lives now. Do we eat? Do we sleep? Do we breathe? All must be sanctioned by the sisters." "Well," Laura pressed, "why don't you say something?" "Because," he snapped, "you're right, I don't believe it. Frankly, your precious sisters are freaks, unbalanced, and forgive me, but they've found their victim in you." "You're being unfair," Laura protested. "They're genuine. I know it. I felt it." "All right, let's say they're sincere. That doesn't make them sane. You meet one of them for 10 minutes in a lavatory. She tells you she sees Christine beside us. Well, any half-trained psychic could read your grief in an instant. Then, drunk on her own success, she declares we must flee Venice. I'm sorry, but to hell with it." His anger steadied him, sobered him. He wanted to rise, march across the room, and tell the old charlatans exactly what he thought of them. Laura's voice was soft, wounded. "I knew you'd react like this. I told them you would. They said not to worry. As long as we leave Venice tomorrow, everything will be all right." "For God's sake," John muttered. He abandoned the thought of confrontation, reached for the wine, and poured himself a glass.
"After all," Laura said softly, fastening her bag, "we've really seen the best of Venice. I don't mind moving on. If we stayed, I'd have this gnawing feeling inside me, as though Christine were unhappy, urging us to leave." "Right," John replied, his voice edged with finality. "That settles it. We'll go. Straight back to the hotel. Tell reception we're leaving in the morning. Have you eaten enough?" Laura sighed. "Don't be so harsh. Why not come and meet them? Let them explain the vision to you. Perhaps then you'd take it seriously. They say Christine is more worried about you than me, and the blind sister insists you're psychic, though you don't know it." John gave a bitter laugh. "Psychic, am I? Then my intuition tells me to get out of this restaurant now. We'll decide about leaving Venice once we're back at the hotel." He signaled for the bill. They waited in silence, Laura restless, fiddling with her bag, John glaring across the room at the sisters, who were tucking into heaping plates of spaghetti with very little mysticism about them. When the bill was paid, John rose. "Ready?" "I'm going to say goodbye first," Laura said stubbornly, her mouth set in a way that stabbed him with the memory of their lost child. "As you like," he muttered, striding out without a backward glance. Outside, the night had changed. The soft warmth of earlier had given way to rain. The tourists had vanished, leaving only a few figures hurrying beneath umbrellas. The streets were empty, the canals stagnant and dark beneath shuttered houses. This is the real Venice, John thought. Not the glittering mask of daylight, but the damp silence of decay. Laura caught up with him, and together they walked on in silence. Behind the Doge's palace, they emerged into the Piazza San Marco. The rain fell harder now. They huddled beneath the colonnades with the last stragglers. The orchestras were gone, the tables bare, chairs stacked upside down. The experts are right, John thought grimly. Venice is sinking. One day tourists will come not to walk its streets, but to peer down into the waters, glimpsing marble and columns far below, a drowned city revealed for moments between tides, a lost world swallowed by slime and mud. Their footsteps rang against the wet stones, the rain dripping from the gutters above. A bleak ending to a night that had begun with hope already drowned.
When they reached the hotel, Laura went straight to the lift. John lingered at the desk for the key, and the night porter handed him an envelope at the same time. A telegram. He tore it open, scanning the words twice before moving toward the lift where Laura waited. Johnny under observation. Suspected appendicitis. No cause for alarm, but surgeon advises caution. Charles Hill. He passed it to her. This came while we were out. Not the best of news. The lift carried them upward in silence. On the second floor, Laura folded the telegram carefully. "Well, this decides it, doesn't it? Proof at last. We must leave Venice. It isn't us in danger. It's Johnny. That's what Christine was trying to tell the sisters." The next morning, John placed a call to the headmaster. Then he informed reception of their departure. They packed in silence, neither mentioning the visions, the warnings, the strange encounters of the day before. John dismissed it all as coincidence. Laura did not, but she kept her conviction to herself. Over breakfast, they discussed the journey home, perhaps the car train from Milan to Calais. Early in the season, there should be space. The headmaster had said there was no urgency. Then the call came from England. Laura answered while John was in the bathroom. When he returned, she was still on the line, her face pale, her eyes anxious. "It's Mrs. Hill. Johnny had a restless night. The surgeon may have to operate. The appendix is awkwardly placed. It isn't straightforward." John took the receiver. The headmaster's wife spoke in a calm, careful tone. "I'm so sorry to trouble you, but we thought you should know. Johnny is very brave, though he has some fever. The surgeon says this isn't unusual. Sometimes the appendix shifts position, making things more complicated. He'll decide this evening whether to operate." "Yes, of course," John replied, his voice steady. "We understand."
"Please, tell your wife not to worry," Mrs. Hill's voice soothed down the line. "The hospital is excellent, the staff attentive, and the surgeon inspires every confidence." "Yes, yes," John replied, but broke off as Laura gestured urgently beside him. "If we can't get the car on the train, I'll fly," she said quickly. "They'll find me a seat. At least one of us will be there tonight." John nodded, forcing calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Hill. We'll manage. I'm sure Johnny is in good hands. Goodbye." He set the receiver down and looked around the chaos of their room. Suitcases gaping, tissue paper strewn, maps and baskets and coats spilling everywhere. God, what a bloody mess. The phone rang again. The hall porter. A sleeper booked for tomorrow night, space for the car secured. Laura seized the receiver. "Could you book one seat on the midday flight to London today? It's imperative I get home this evening. My husband will follow with the car tomorrow." "Now wait," John protested. "No need for panic. 24 hours won't make the difference." But Laura's face had drained of color. "It mightn't to you, but it does to me. I've lost one child. I won't lose another." "All right, darling, all right." He reached for her, but she brushed him off, intent on her instructions. He turned back to the luggage. No point arguing. Better to let her have her way. They could both fly, of course, and he could return later for the car. But the expense, the effort. Bad enough she was flying while he took the train. "We could both go by air," he suggested weakly. "Absurd," she snapped. "As long as I'm there tonight and you follow tomorrow, that's all that matters. We'll need the car for the hospital and the luggage. We can't just abandon it here." He saw her point. Foolish to press it. He was as worried as she was, though he'd never admit it aloud. "I'm going downstairs to stand over the porter. They always try harder if you're there in person. Everything I need is packed, just my overnight case. You can bring the rest." She had been gone barely 5 minutes when the phone rang again. Laura's voice, breathless with urgency. "Darling, it couldn't be better. The porter found me a place on a charter flight leaving in less than an hour. A motor launch takes us direct from San Marco in 10 minutes. Someone canceled. I'll be at Gatwick in 4 hours." John gripped the receiver. "I'll be down right away." At the reception desk, she no longer looked pale or anxious. Her face was set with purpose. She was leaving, and nothing could stop her. John wished desperately they were going together. The thought of staying on in Venice alone, of the dreary drive to Milan,
The empty hotel room, the dragging hours of the train, filled him with a heaviness he could hardly bear, and beneath it all, the gnawing worry for Johnny. They walked together to the San Marco landing stage. The molo glittered after the rain, a breeze stirring the scarves and postcards on the stalls. Tourists strolled contentedly, the city alive with light and laughter, as though mocking his private despair. "I'll ring you tonight from Milan," he told her. "The hills will give you a bed, and if you're at the hospital, I'll get the latest news. That must be your charter party. You're welcome to them." The passengers were already boarding the waiting launch. Middle-aged couples with Union Jack tags on their bags, 2 Methodist ministers shepherding them. One stepped forward, beaming, dentures flashing. "You must be the lady joining us. Welcome aboard and to the Union of Fellowship. Sorry we hadn't a seat for your husband, too." Laura turned quickly, kissed John, laughter trembling at the corner of her mouth. "Do you think they'll break into hymns?" she whispered. "Take care of yourself. Call me tonight." The pilot gave a sharp toot of the horn. In a moment, she was gone, descending the steps, her scarlet coat a vivid splash of color among the drab suits of her companions. She waved once, the launch tooted again, and then it was moving away, carrying her into the lagoon. John stood watching, his heart hollow with loss. Then he turned, walking back through the bright, bustling day that seemed suddenly drained of meaning. The hotel bedroom was desolate. Nothing was so melancholy, he thought, as a room just vacated, still bearing the imprint of its occupant. Laura's second coat lay across the bed. Her powder dusted the dressing table. A tissue with lipstick smeared across it sat crumpled in the wastebasket. Even the empty toothpaste tube on the shelf above the basin seemed to mock him. The sounds of traffic drifted in from the Grand Canal, but Laura was no longer there to hear them. The life had gone out of the room. He finished packing, left the luggage ready, and went down to pay the bill. The reception clerk was already greeting new arrivals. On the terrace, people sat with their newspapers planning their pleasant day. The world moved on, heedless. John chose to take an early lunch on the hotel terrace, clinging to the comfort of familiar ground. The fiasco of the previous night's meal had left him hollow, and he welcomed the trolley of hors d'oeuvres when it arrived. Yet even here, change intruded. Their favorite head waiter was absent, and the table they always claimed was now occupied by a honeymoon couple, radiant with laughter. John was shown instead to a small, lonely table tucked behind a tub of flowers. She's airborne now, he thought grimly. Laura, seated between the Methodist ministers, probably recounting Johnny's illness, perhaps even confiding more than she should. Well, the sisters could rest easy. Their prophecy had been fulfilled. When lunch was over, he wasted no time. He wanted only to leave, to fetch the car, to be on the road to Milan. He said his farewells at reception, followed the porter with his luggage piled high on a trolley, and stepped aboard the steam ferry at San Marco. For a fleeting moment, as the boat pulled away, he felt a pang. Venice glittered in the sunlight, facades gleaming, balconies bright, tourists parading along the Mulo. Memories pressed in. His first glimpse of the city on honeymoon, another visit years later, and now this abortive holiday, cut short. Would they ever return? The ferry churned up the Grand Canal, the water flashing, the palaces decaying, yet beautiful, the little red house Laura had once claimed as our house. Soon the boat would veer left, bypassing the Rialto and the grandest palaces, heading straight for the Piazzale Roma. Another ferry approached, crowded with passengers. For a foolish instant, John wished he could trade places, be among the happy tourists bound for Venice, not away from it. And then he saw her. Laura. Her scarlet coat blazed against the drab crowd. At her side, the twin sisters. The active one gripped Laura's arm, speaking urgently. Laura's hair whipped in the wind, her hands gesturing, her face etched with distress. John froze. Too stunned to shout, too shaken to wave, and even if he had, it would have been useless. The ferries had already passed, his own vessel surging onward, carrying him away, while Laura and the sisters vanished into the distance.
What the hell had happened? The questions circled in his mind like vultures. Perhaps the charter flight had never taken off, but then why hadn't Laura telephoned? And what in God's name were those damned sisters doing with her? Had she run into them at the airport? Coincidence? Or something darker? Maybe the flight was canceled. Laura would have gone straight back to the hotel, expecting to find him there, ready to drive with him to Milan after all. A blasted mix-up, nothing more. That had to be it. The only sensible thing was to call the hotel the moment he reached Piazzale Roma. Tell her to wait. He would return and fetch her. As for the sisters, they could go to hell. The ferry docked in its usual chaos. He fought through the crowd, found a porter for his luggage, then hunted for a telephone. Coins fumbled, numbers searched, delays piling up. At last he got through. "There's been a frightful muddle," he explained breathlessly. "My wife is on her way back to the hotel. I saw her on a ferry with 2 friends. Please tell her to wait. Detain her if you must. I'll be back on the next service." The clerk understood. John hung up, relief washing over him. Thank God Laura hadn't arrived before his call, or she'd have been told he was already bound for Milan. He left his baggage at the garage, promising to collect it later, then hurried back to the landing stage. The minutes dragged like hours. Why hadn't she phoned? What had gone wrong at the airport? No use guessing. She would explain everything soon. One thing was certain. He would not let those sisters entangle them again. He could already hear Laura's voice. "They missed their flight too, John. Couldn't we give them a lift?" Finally, the ferry churned into view. He boarded, grim, ignoring the familiar sights he had once bid farewell to. The Grand Canal slid past unheeded. San Marco was more crowded than ever, the afternoon throngs pressing shoulder to shoulder, laughter and chatter filling the air. He pushed through, reached the hotel, and swung open the door. He expected to see Laura waiting in the lounge, perhaps with the sisters beside her, but the chairs were empty. At the desk, the clerk he had spoken to on the telephone stood with the manager, their faces grave.
"Has my wife arrived?" John demanded. "No, sir, not yet." "Are you certain?" "Absolutely, sir. I've been here since your call at 1:45. I haven't left the desk." John's voice sharpened. "But I saw her. On a vaporetto by the Accademia. She would have landed at San Marco minutes later and walked straight here." The clerk hesitated. "You said she was with friends." "Acquaintances," John corrected. "2 ladies we met at Torcello. Twins. Identical. I assumed the flight was cancelled, that she'd met them at the airport and returned with them to find me. But it was after 3 now. A matter of moments from San Marco to the hotel. Where the hell was she? Perhaps the Signora went with her friends to their hotel. Do you know where they are staying?" "No, I don't even know their names. Only that they were sisters, twins. But why on earth would she go with them and not here?" The swing door opened. Not Laura. Just 2 other guests. The manager intervened smoothly. "I will telephone the airport. At least we will know what happened with the flight." "Yes, do that," John said, pacing, cigarette trembling between his fingers. What a nightmare muddle. And how unlike Laura. She knew he was leaving for Milan after lunch. She might even have thought he had already gone. Surely, if the flight had been cancelled, she would have telephoned at once.
The manager was long on the line, his Italian too rapid for John to follow. At last he returned, his face apologetic. "It is more mysterious than ever, sir. The charter flight was not delayed. It departed on schedule, with every seat filled. No hitch at all. The Signora must simply have changed her mind." "Changed her mind?" John repeated, incredulous. "Why would she? She was desperate to be home tonight." The manager shrugged, smiling faintly. "You know how ladies can be, sir. Perhaps she decided she would rather travel with you by train. I assure you, the charter was most respectable. A Caravelle aircraft, perfectly safe." "Yes, yes," John snapped. "I don't blame your arrangements. I just can't understand what possessed her, unless it was those two women." The manager said nothing. The clerk, uneasy, ventured, "Could it be, sir, that you were mistaken, that it was not the Signora you saw on the Vaporetto?" John's reply was sharp, almost furious. "Mistaken? Oh, no, it was my wife. She wore her red coat, no hat, exactly as she left here. I saw her as clearly as I see you now. I would swear it in a court of law." The manager spread his hands. "It is unfortunate we do not know the names of the two ladies or their hotel. You met them at Torcello, you say?" "Yes, briefly. They weren't staying there, but we saw them again later, at dinner in Venice." The clerk excused himself to attend to arriving guests. John turned desperately to the manager. "Would it help to telephone the hotel at Torcello? Perhaps someone there knows who they are or where they're staying in Venice." "We can try," the manager said gravely. "It is a small hope, but we can try." John resumed his pacing, eyes fixed on the swing door, praying for the flash of scarlet that would mean Laura had returned. The manager spoke at length on the telephone, describing in detail two elderly sisters dressed in gray, identical, one of them blind. When he hung up, he shook his head. "They remember the ladies, but only as lunch guests. No names, nothing more." John cursed under his breath. Well, that's that. Nothing to do but wait. He lit another cigarette and went out onto the terrace, pacing like a caged animal. His eyes scanned every passing boat, steamers, motor launches, gondolas, searching for her face, her coat, any sign. The minutes dragged. A dreadful thought gnawed at him. What if this had been arranged? What if Laura had never intended to board the plane? What if last night, in the restaurant, she had made some secret pact with the sisters? No, impossible. I'm going mad. More likely, he told himself, they had intercepted her at the airport, whispered some psychic warning of doom, convinced her the aircraft would crash, and Laura, fragile, grieving, had believed them. But if so, why had she not come back to the hotel? Where was she now? The sun was sinking, the water no longer dappled with light. 4 o'clock, 1:30, still no sign. John returned to the desk, his nerves frayed. "I can't just hang about. Even if she does turn up, we'll never make Milan tonight. I might see her in the piazza walking with those women. If she arrives while I'm out, explain to her, will you?"
The clerk's concern had been genuine, but John could not bear to linger. He pushed through the swing door into the night air and drifted toward the Piazza San Marco. He scoured the arcades, peered into every shop, crossed and recrossed the great square a dozen times, weaving between the tables at Florian's and Quadri's. Laura's scarlet coat, the unmistakable figures of the twin sisters, surely they would stand out, even in this restless crowd. But there was nothing. He pressed on into the merceria, shoulder to shoulder with shoppers and idlers, but instinct told him it was useless. Why would Laura have missed her flight, only to vanish into this throng? And if she had, why had she not come straight to the hotel? There was only one course left: find the sisters.
Their hotel could be anywhere, among the hundreds scattered across Venice, perhaps even on the Zattere or the Giudecca. But no, that seemed unlikely. More probable they were lodged near San Zaccaria, close to the restaurant where they had dined the night before. The blind one would not wander far at night. Cursing himself for not thinking of it sooner, John turned back, leaving the bright shopping streets for the narrower, darker alleys. He found the restaurant easily enough, though it was not yet open for dinner. A waiter was laying tables, not the one from last night. "I had dinner here yesterday. 2 ladies sat at that corner table." He pointed. The proprietor appeared, disheveled, in shirt sleeves. "You wish to reserve that table, signore?" "No," John said quickly. 2 ladies, sisters, twins, elderly. Do you remember?" The man's eyes lit with recognition. He mimed blindness, covering his eyes with his hands. "Ah, sì, signore. La povera signorina. Yes, I remember." John leaned forward, desperate. "Do you know their names, where they were staying? I must find them."
The proprietor could offer nothing. Names, addresses, gone like smoke. "In Venice, the whole world meets," he had said with a smile. Friends? John thought bitterly. More like abductors. By the time he stumbled upon the Questura, panic had hardened into dread. He pushed inside, past the uniformed police, and asked for someone who spoke English. Directed upstairs, he entered a waiting room where a couple sat, clearly tourists, clearly in trouble. "Come and sit down," the man said, offering a cigarette. "We've been waiting half an hour. What a country! They'd never leave us like this at home." John accepted, lowering himself into the chair. "What's your trouble?" "My wife's handbag," the man explained, "pinched in the merceria. She put it down for a moment, and it was gone. I say a thief. She swears it was the shop girl. Who's to say? These ITs are all alike. We'll never see it again. What about you? What have you lost?" "Suitcase," John lied quickly. "Important papers inside." How could he say it? "I've lost my wife." The words would not form. The man nodded, puffing smoke. "As I said, these ITs are all alike. Musso knew how to deal with them. Too many communists now. And with this murderer at large, they won't bother with our troubles. Every policeman in Venice is out hunting him." John turned sharply. "Murderer? What murderer?"
"Don't tell me you haven't heard." The man stared at him, incredulous. "Venice has talked of nothing else. It's been in every paper, on the radio, even the English press. A grisly business. A tourist woman found with her throat cut last week. And this morning, an old man, same wound, same knife. They say it must be a maniac, no motive at all. A nasty thing in the middle of the tourist season." "My wife and I never bother with newspapers on holiday," John replied stiffly. "And we're not much given to gossip in hotels." The man chuckled. "Very wise. It might have spoiled your holiday, especially if your wife is nervous. Well, we're off tomorrow. Venice has gone downhill since our last visit. And now this handbag business, really the limit." The inner door opened. A senior officer beckoned the couple inside. The man winked at John. "We won't get any satisfaction, I'll bet." And then they were gone. John lit another cigarette, but the smoke tasted bitter. A strange unreality pressed down on him. What was he doing here? What use was it? Laura was gone, spirited away by those infernal sisters, perhaps forever. The fantasy he and Laura had once joked about in Torcello now seemed horribly plausible. The twins were not harmless eccentrics, but criminals in disguise, luring victims to some unspeakable fate. Perhaps even the very murderers the police were hunting. Who would suspect 2 elderly women, so respectable in appearance, living quietly in some shabby pensione? He crushed the cigarette half-smoked. This is paranoia, he told himself. This is how people lose their minds. His watch read 6:30. Enough. Better to abandon this futile chase. Return to the hotel, call England, ask about Johnny.
Poor Johnny. He had not thought of him since catching sight of Laura on the Vaporetto. But it was too late. The inner door opened again. The couple emerged, the husband muttering, "Usual claptrap. They'll do what they can, but no hope. Too many foreigners in Venice, all thieves. The locals above reproach, of course. Wouldn't pay them to steal from customers. Well, good luck to you." They nodded and were gone. John rose, his heart heavy, and followed the police officer into the inner room.
The formalities dragged on. Name, passport, length of stay, until at last came the questions. Sweat prickled on John's forehead as he launched into his story. The sisters at Torcello, the restaurant, Laura's fragile state after Christine's death, the telegram about Johnny, the decision to fly home, Laura's departure, and her inexplicable reappearance. By the time he finished, he felt drained, as though he had driven for hours through the night with fever burning in his veins. The officer leaned back, his English precise, his accent heavy. "You say your wife was suffering the after-effects of shock. This was noticeable during your stay in Venice?" "Yes," John admitted. "She had been very ill. The holiday did her no good. Only when she met those two women at Torcello did her mood change. She clung to the idea that our little girl was watching over her. It gave her a kind of false normality." The officer nodded. "Understandable. And the telegram last night, another shock?" "Yes. That's why we decided to leave." "No quarrel between you? No disagreement?" "None. We were in complete agreement. My only regret was not being able to accompany her on the flight." The officer tapped his pen thoughtfully. "It could be amnesia, a sudden lapse. Meeting the two ladies gave her an anchor, so she clung to them. You have described them well. They should not be difficult to trace. For now, return to your hotel. We will contact you when we have news." At least they believed him. They did not think him mad, inventing phantoms. "You must understand," John pressed, "I am deeply anxious. These women may have some criminal design upon my wife. One hears of such things." The officer smiled faintly for the first time. "Please, do not concern yourself. I am sure there will be a satisfactory explanation." All very well, John thought bitterly. But what explanation could there possibly be? "I'm sorry to take up your time," he said aloud, "especially when I know the police are occupied with a murderer still at large." He let the words hang deliberately. Perhaps the officer would make the connection for him, that Laura's disappearance and the killings might not be so far apart. The officer rose, smoothing his uniform. That. We hope to have the murderer under lock and key very soon."
The officer's calm assurance still echoed in his ears as John trudged back to the hotel. Murderers, missing wives, stolen handbags, all under control. Perhaps the man was right. Perhaps Laura had suffered some sudden lapse of memory, clung to the sisters for support, and they had taken her back to their hotel. Perhaps even now they were trying to trace him. He could do nothing more. The police had it in hand. All he wanted was a bed, a whiskey, and a call to England. The page led him to a bare little room at the back of the hotel, shutters closed, the smell of cooking drifting up from the courtyard. John splashed his face at the basin, stripped off his shoes, and collapsed on the bed. From somewhere nearby, a radio blared an old tune, one of Laura's favorites years ago. "I love you, baby. I can't get you out of my mind." The words seemed to mock him. He ordered whiskey. Too little ice, too weak a comfort, but he drained it in one gulp, desperate for numbness. Then the telephone rang. His heart lurched. This is it. The final blow. Johnny dying, or already dead. But Mrs. Hill's voice came, calm and bright. "All is well. The surgeon operated at midday. It was a complete success. Johnny is going to be fine. You can rest easy now." Relief surged through him. Thank God. Yes,
she said warmly. "Now I'll let you speak to your wife." John froze. His wife? Then he heard it. Laura's voice. Cool, clear, unmistakable. "Darling, darling, are you there?" The receiver slipped in his damp hand. His skin went clammy with sweat. "I'm here," he whispered.
The line crackled, Laura's voice faint but steady. "It's not a very good line, but never mind. As Mrs. Hill told you, all is well. The surgeon was wonderful. The sister on Johnny's ward so kind. I went straight from Gatwick to the hospital. Johnny was still dopey, but smiling when he saw me. The Hills have given me their spare room. I'll rest after dinner. I'm exhausted. How was the drive to Milan? Where are you staying?" John's reply came from somewhere outside himself, mechanical, drained of life. "I'm not in Milan. I'm still in Venice." "Still in Venice? Why? Did the car break down?" "I can't explain. A stupid mix-up." His throat tightened, tears burning behind his eyes. "What sort of mix-up?" Her tone sharpened, suspicious. "You weren't in a crash. No, nothing like that." A pause. Then, coldly, "Your voice sounds slurred. Don't tell me you've been drinking." If only he knew. He was on the edge of collapse, but not from whiskey. "I thought I saw you on a vaporetto with the sisters." The words fell flat, absurd, impossible to explain. "How could you have seen me with them? You knew I went to the airport. Really, darling, you're being ridiculous. You've got those poor old dears on the brain. I hope you didn't mention them to Mrs. Hill." "No." "Well then, you'll catch the train from Milan tomorrow, won't you?" "Yes, of course." "I still don't understand what kept you in Venice. It all sounds odd. But thank God Johnny is safe, and I'm here." "Yes," he murmured. From far away, he heard the boom of a gong in the headmaster's hall. "You'd better go. My love to Johnny. Take care of yourself, darling. Don't miss the train tomorrow. Drive carefully." The line clicked dead. John drained the last of his whiskey, drowned it with ginger ale, and staggered to the window. He flung open the shutters. The night air struck his face, but it did not clear his head. Relief surged through him. Johnny safe, Laura safe, but it was poisoned by a deeper unease. The voice on the line had sounded exactly like Laura's, yet he leant out into the Venetian night and felt with dreadful certainty that it had been a counterfeit, a phantom echo. Laura was not in England. She was still here, in Venice, somewhere in Venice, with the sisters.
The truth was inescapable. He had seen them, all three, Laura in her scarlet coat, flanked by the sisters. It had not been a trick of the light, nor another woman mistaken for her. He had seen them. So what was the explanation? Madness? Or something darker? Perhaps the sisters, with their uncanny powers, had reached across the water, ensnaring his mind, making him believe Laura was with them. But why? To what end? No answer made sense. Unless it had been a hallucination, in which case, he thought grimly, he needed a doctor as badly as Johnny had needed a surgeon. He pulled on his shoes, raked his fingers through his hair. 10 minutes to 8. If he had a drink first, it would be easier to face the manager, to confess his mistake, to apologize for the trouble he had caused. Downstairs, the bar was crowded. No familiar faces, thank God. He swallowed a whiskey in one gulp, glancing nervously toward the reception desk. The manager's back was turned, framed in the doorway of an inner office. On impulse, cowardice really, John slipped through the swing door and out into the street. Dinner first, he told himself. Then I'll face them. It will be easier with food inside me. He chose a small restaurant nearby, one he and Laura had visited before. Sitting alone at a corner table, he ordered vitello alla marsala and half a bottle of Merlot. The nightmare was over, he told himself. Laura was safe in England. Johnny was safe in hospital. The rest was only embarrassment, apologies to the hotel staff, nothing more. The anonymity was soothing. The murmur of other diners washed over him like background music. He ate slowly, in a haze, the food rich but tasteless, the wine dull on his tongue. When his neighbors rose and left, he noticed the clock, 9:30. No use delaying further. He finished his coffee, lit a cigarette, and paid the bill. As he walked back through the Venetian night, he thought, "The manager will be relieved. All is well. The nightmare is behind me." But the sense of unreality clung to him still, like a shadow that refused to lift.
The swing door gave way, and John stepped inside. At once he saw them. The policeman in uniform, the manager, the clerk. All three turned toward him. The manager's face lit with relief. "Eccolo, I knew the signore would not be far. Things are moving. The two ladies have been traced. They have kindly agreed to accompany the police to the questura. If you will go at once, this agente will escort you." John flushed. "I've caused everyone a great deal of trouble. I meant to explain before dinner, but you were not at the desk. The fact is, I spoke to my wife. She made the flight to London after all. I spoke to her on the telephone. It was all a mistake." The manager blinked, bewildered. "The signora is in London?" He broke off, conferred rapidly with the policeman. Then, turning back, "The ladies insist they did not go out today, save for a little shopping this morning. Then, who was it you saw on the Vaporetto?" John shook his head. "An extraordinary mistake on my part. I cannot explain it. Obviously, I did not see my wife or the ladies. I am deeply sorry." The policeman's voice rose in irritation. The clerk, watching John, with a strange, almost suspicious expression. The manager tried to soothe the officer, apologizing profusely, but the atmosphere thickened with unease. "Look," John cut in, "tell the agente I will go with him to headquarters. I will apologize in person, to the police and to the ladies." The manager's relief was palpable. If the signore would take the trouble. The ladies were distressed when questioned at their hotel. They agreed to accompany the police only because they were so concerned for the signora. John's discomfort deepened. Laura must never know of this. She would be outraged. Already his mistake seemed to swell into something criminal, a false report, a chargeable offense. He crossed the Piazza San Marco beside his silent escort. The square was alive with music. 3 orchestras battling in harmony. The cafes crowded with strollers, laughter and applause rising into the night. Yet, for John, the gaiety was hollow. He walked like a man under guard, the policeman 2 paces to his left, mute, implacable, as though escorting him not to an apology, but to judgment. The room was different this time. A sallow-faced officer sat behind the desk, his expression sour. The 2 sisters seated stiffly to one side, pale and visibly shaken. A uniformed underling loomed behind them like a guard. John's escort spoke rapidly in Italian, while John, after a moment's hesitation, stepped toward the sisters. "There has been a terrible mistake," he said. "I don't know how to apologize. It is entirely my fault. The police are not to blame." The active sister twitched, half rising, her mouth trembling. "We don't understand," she said, her Scots accent sharp. "We said good night to your wife last night at dinner, and we have not seen her since.
Then the police came to our pension, saying your wife was missing and you had accused us. My sister is not strong. She was badly shaken." "A mistake. A frightful mistake," John repeated, helplessly. The officer tapped John's earlier statement with his pencil. His English was broken, his tone harsh. "So, this document, all lies. You not speak truth?" "I believed it true at the time. I could have sworn in a court of law I saw my wife with these ladies on a vaporetto this afternoon. Now I know I was mistaken." The sister protested, her voice rising. "We were never near the Grand Canal today. We shopped in the Merceria this morning, then stayed indoors. My sister was unwell. I told the police this again and again. The pension staff will confirm it. He refused to listen." The officer snapped, his voice sharp as a whip. "So, and this Signola? What happened to the Signora?" "My wife is safe in England," John said patiently, though his voice faltered. "I spoke to her by telephone after 7. She took the charter flight. She is with friends now." The officer's eyes narrowed. "So, who you see on Vaporetto in red coat? If not these signorine, then what signorine?" John felt his words collapse into nonsense. "My eyes deceived me. I thought I saw my wife with these ladies. But no, my wife in aircraft, these ladies in pension all the time." It sounded absurd, like stage parody, his English breaking down under strain. He half expected to bow and fold his hands into his sleeves. The officer thumped the desk, exasperated. "So, all this work for nothing. Hotels searched, pensions disturbed, police wasted. You make mistake. Too much vino at mezzogiorno, eh? You see 100 women in red coats on 100 vaporetti?" He stood, scattering the papers. His eyes turned to the sisters. "And you, signorine, do you wish to make complaint against this man?"
The officer dismissed them with a grunt, waving his hand as though brushing away a nuisance. John followed the sisters out into the Venetian night, the blind one leaning heavily on her twin's arm. Once outside, she turned her sightless eyes toward him. Her voice was soft, halting, yet charged with eerie conviction. "You saw us, and your wife too, but not today. You saw us in the future." John faltered. "I don't follow," he whispered. The active sister frowned, pressing a finger to her lips. "Come along, dear," she urged her twin. "You're tired. We must get you home." Then, in a low aside to John, "She's psychic. Your wife told you, I believe. But I won't have her falling into trances here in the street." God forbid, John thought, shuddering. The little procession moved slowly along the narrow street, the canal glimmering black to their left. Their pace was halting, broken by bridges, the blind sister's steps uncertain. John quickly lost all sense of direction, but it no longer mattered. The police escort was with them, and the sisters seemed to know their way. "I must explain," John said softly. "My wife would never forgive me if I didn't." And so, as they walked, he told the story again. About the telegram, the call from Mrs. Hill, the decision to return to England, Laura by air, himself by car and train. He spoke more calmly now, without the feverish edge of his earlier statement to the police. The sinister image of the two Vaporetti passing in the Grand Canal, Laura trapped between the sisters, no longer seemed an abduction, but a grotesque misunderstanding. Yet he spoke with sincerity, almost pleading, as though desperate for their sympathy. "You see," he concluded, "I truly believed I had seen you with Laura, and I thought—" He hesitated, ashamed to voice the thought. "I thought perhaps she had lost her memory, met you at the airport, and you had brought her back here,
To your hotel." The words hung in the night air, fragile, absurd, yet tinged with a dread he could not shake.
They had reached the pension, a modest house at the edge of the square. The escort left them with a curt buonanotte, vanishing into the shadows. "Will you come in?" asked the active sister. "We can find you coffee or perhaps tea." "No, thank you. I must return to the hotel. I only wanted to be sure you understood and that you forgive me." "There is nothing to forgive," she said gently. "It is another example of second sight. My sister and I have experienced it many times. I should like to record it for our files." John forced a smile. "It has never happened to me before." "Not consciously, perhaps," she answered. "But my sister felt you had psychic understanding. She told your wife. She also warned your wife last night that you would face danger, that you must leave Venice. And was not the telegram proof? Your son was ill. You had to return. Heaven be praised, your wife flew home to be with him." "Yes, but why did I see her with you, on the Vaporetto, when she was already on her way to England?" "Thought transference, perhaps," she said. "Your wife may have been thinking of us. She knows we would pass on any message from your little one in the spirit world." John scribbled his London address, even the telephone number, and handed it over. He could already imagine Laura insisting on inviting them to stay, the spare room given up, a séance in the living room, tambourines rattling in the dark. "Well, I must be off," he said. "Good night, and my apologies again." He shook the active sister's hand, then turned to the blind twin. "I hope you are not too tired." Her sightless eyes fixed on him. She gripped his hand with surprising strength, refusing to let go. "The child," she whispered, her voice broken, staccato. "The child. I can see the child." John froze. A bead of froth gathered at the corner of her mouth. Her head jerked back violently, and she half collapsed into her sister's arms.
"We must get her inside," the sister urged. "It's all right. She's not ill. It's the beginning of a trance." Together, they half carried the rigid figure into the pensione, lowering her into a chair. From the back rooms came the smell of cooking, and a woman hurried forward, alarmed. The active sister waved John away. "Don't worry. We can manage. You had better go. Sometimes she is sick after these turns." "I'm most frightfully sorry," John began, but she had already turned her back, bending over the choking twin. He lingered a moment, then, with a final useless offer, "Is there anything I can do?" he turned on his heel and crossed the square. One backward glance. The door was already shut. What a grotesque ending to the night! His fault, all of it. Dragging the poor women to police headquarters, then this fit, or trance, or whatever it was. More likely epilepsy. A miserable burden for the sister, though she seemed hardened to it. God forbid they should ever end up under his roof in London, séances in the living room, tambourines rattling in the dark. But now, where the devil was he? The square lay deserted, the inevitable church looming at one end. He could not recall the way back to the Riva degli Schiavoni. Too many turnings, too many alleys. Then recognition struck. The church, San Giovanni in Bragora. He and Laura had visited it one morning to see a Cima da Conegliano. Surely it was close to the Schiavoni, the lagoon, the lights, and the tourists. Yes, he remembered a turning that led straight there. He plunged into the alley. Halfway down, he faltered. Something was wrong. The place was familiar, yes, but not from that morning. From last night. He realized with a chill that he was retracing the path they had walked the previous evening, only now from the opposite direction. Still, it would be quicker, he told himself. Cross the little bridge, find the arsenal on his left, the Schiavoni to his right. Simpler than wandering back into the maze. So he pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth,
the silence of the canals closing around him.
He was almost at the bridge when he saw her, the child, the same little figure in the pixie hood, the same darting steps he had glimpsed the night before. But now she was running for her life, breath ragged, eyes wide with terror. Behind her, a man slipped from shadow to shadow, flattening himself against the wall whenever she glanced back. John's heart lurched. The drunken yell of last night, the murders whispered in the papers, suddenly they fused into one. This was no coincidence. The girl tore across the bridge, and John, afraid to startle her, shrank into the doorway of a courtyard. A moment later, she burst through, sobbing, the sound raw and broken. Not the cry of a child in mischief, but the gasping despair of prey. She hurled herself against a rear door, which gave way beneath her hands and vanished inside. "It's all right," John called, stumbling after her. "I won't let him hurt you." His English words were useless here, but perhaps the tone would soothe her. She did not hear. She was already scrambling up a spiral staircase, sobs echoing against the stone. Behind them came the sounds of pursuit, shouts in Italian, a dog barking, footsteps closing in. This is it, John thought. We're trapped together, the child and I. Unless we can bar a door above, he'll have us both. He followed her up, lungs burning, and saw her dart into a room off the landing. He slammed the door behind them, heart hammering, and, merciful heaven, there was a bolt. He rammed it home. The room was bare. A mattress on a broken bed, a heap of rags in the corner. No parents, no protection. Only the child, crouched by the open window, trembling, her sobs muffled by the night air. John pressed his back against the door, listening for the first blow that would shake it from its hinges.
Breathless, he gasped, "It's all right, it's all right," stretching out his hand with a forced smile. The child staggered upright, the pixie hood slipping from her head to the floor. He froze, disbelief twisting into horror. This was no child at all, but a squat, thick-bodied dwarf, scarcely 3 feet tall, with a grotesquely oversized adult head, gray hair hanging in uneven locks to her shoulders. She was no longer sobbing, she was grinning, nodding at him with a grotesque rhythm. From the landing outside came the pounding of boots, fists hammering on the door, a dog barking, and voices shouting in chorus, "Open up! Police!" The creature's hand darted into her sleeve. She drew out a knife and with shocking force hurled it at him. The blade struck his throat. He staggered, blood spilling hot and sticky through his fingers as he fell. And then, through the haze of pain, he saw it, the vaporetto gliding down the Grand Canal, Laura and the 2 sisters aboard. Not today, not tomorrow, but the day after. And he understood at last why they were together and the sorrowful purpose of their journey. The dwarf gibbered in the corner, the pounding, the shouts, the barking dog all faded into distance. "Oh, God," he thought, "what a bloody, ridiculous way to die."
And thus the story ended. If you like this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.